right, hello everyone. My name is Michelle Hebert, Director of Communications here at SAANYS, and welcome to today's edition of SAANYS Connect. This episode is part 2 of our discussion on stress and anxiety. Now, before we begin, we're going to hear a brief word from our sponsor, Peaceful Schools.
Peaceful Schools is a certified women-owned business based in Syracuse. We are committed to giving everyone the power to be peaceful and the skills to be resilient. Now more than ever, it is our responsibility as school professionals to care for the social and emotional health of students and school staff. Our Resilience Forward framework has been developed over 20 years of working with and in schools throughout New York State. We provide customizable services to meet the needs of our clients and the communities they serve. Together, we can ensure that everyone has the social skills necessary to navigate challenges today and throughout their lives in a healthy and safe way.
Okay, thank you, Peaceful Schools. We're happy to have you with us today. Now, before we get started, I want to quickly share some news about our upcoming virtual conference, which is in collaboration with our friends at NYSCAPE. On November 22nd, SAANYS will have a one-day leadership strand within the larger four-day NYSCAPE virtual conference. The workshop offerings are diverse and timely and all available for viewing from the comfort of your home on a Sunday. So visit saanys.org right here to learn more. Okay, and we'll get back to our presentation. And just a few housekeeping items. First, I suggest you place your screen view in speaker view mode rather than gallery view mode, so the speaker appears in the larger screen. Second, everyone has been placed in mute, so please use the chat panel throughout the presentation for questions and comments. If time permits, we'll unmute at the end of the program for live Q&A. Lastly, this presentation is being recorded and will be placed on the SAANYS website along with any additional resources mentioned today. With that, I'll turn it over to Karen Bronson, our Director of Professional Learning.
Thanks, Michelle, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our SAANYS Connect panel. As Michelle mentioned, this is the second of a two-part series on the impact of the stress and anxiety that you and the members of your school communities are experiencing over this unpredictable year. And most importantly, what reasonable steps you can take to reduce that stress and anxiety. In part 1, 2 weeks ago, we focused on what you can do as a school leader to manage and reduce your own very understandable stress levels. Today, we're going to look more deeply at strategies that are currently in use in schools around New York State to reduce the stress and anxiety that you and your teachers are experiencing. And we're really going to focus for at least some of this discussion on ways that you as a school leader can really support your teachers and hopefully help mitigate and reduce that stress and anxiety through some strategies that we think will be helpful. We also very much believe that the strategies that we're going to focus on today will continue to have benefit and really help build better communication and culture, not only now in this unpredictable time, but hopefully as things even out a little bit in the not too distant future. These strategies are very, very transferable to times that are not quite as unpredictable as the one we are in right now. So we really hope that you will enjoy our conversation and that you will enjoy using some of these strategies now and also in the future. So please help me to welcome today's panelists. We're so happy they're here with us today. Welcome back, Amy Malloy. Amy has been a frequent support on our SAANYS Connect panel. She is the project director for the Mental Health Association in New York State. Welcome, Amy. Thank you for being here today. I would like to welcome Teresa McSweeney and Heather Adams. Terry and Heather are both assistants in research and educational services for New York State United Teachers. And they really have such a good grounding in the kinds of things that teachers are experiencing now, and particularly around some strategies that are helpful. Dr. Laura Lunkenheimer, welcome, Laura. Laura is president and CEO of Peaceful Schools. Laura, thanks for being here today. We like the sound of that, Laura, Peaceful Schools. That feels good already. We like that vibe there. And I would like to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Joseph Fanagrassi, Vice President of Development for Family Counseling Services of the Finger Lakes. And Joe is also a SAANYS mentor. So he will be speaking a bit about our mentoring options, as well as the work that he's doing at Family Counseling Services of the Finger Lakes. Before we begin, I would like to really remind you, our listeners, to post questions or comments, and let's put the accent on comments too, through the chat bar during our discussion. We will leave more time for questions toward the end of the hour. And once again, we'd like to emphasize that this is not the kind of thing where you have a few experts having the conversation and sharing all of the answers. That's not the kind of time we are in right now, certainly. The answers are out there in you too, in things that you are currently doing and things that you are learning in your school communities every day. So one thing that has been great about our SAANYS Connect panels is what our listeners, as well as our panelists, share in terms of some strategies. Hey, we're doing this in my school district, and here's what we're learning from it. Here's something we're experiencing. What about you? So please don't think our chat bar is just for questions for our guests. It's also for you to do some hopefully good sharing with us. All righty. So, and as always on SAANYS Connect, we give you the resources that our panelists will refer to during the discussion. They'll be tagged on the recorded version, which will be posted on the SAANYS website afterward. So let's get started. So I'd really like to begin by asking our panelists to just kind of walk us through and tell us a little bit about the work you currently do, and share what you are currently seeing as some of the primary stressors on teachers and staff right now, and then certainly by extension school leaders in that work you're doing. So just kind of take us through what you are seeing in your own particular work and in your own particular regions. Amy, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Nice to be back with you again. I really appreciate the opportunity. One of the other things I always feel like I should add is, in addition to working at the Mental Health Association, I'm a school board member in Queensbury. So I kind of bring that perspective as well, especially when we talk about the wellness of our staff. So the School Mental Health Resource and Training Center was established to help schools implement the mental health education law. So we started in July 2018, and we've always provided resources for schools around the development of mental health curriculum, professional development for staff, about youth mental health and suicide prevention, and creating trauma-sensitive schools, as well as creating those school community partnerships. We have affiliates all across the state, so we believe very strongly in that school community partnership to help meet the needs of both our staff and our children and families. But I think the other really kind of big thing that's come out of all this is the focus toward wellness of the whole school community, focusing on things like culture and climate. And even from the very beginning, when we were working with schools to provide the professional development, we heard from administrators, and what do you have for staff? So that was back in 2018, 2019. This has always been a concern. So it doesn't feel new. It just feels a little bit more urgent. And certainly the needs are changing. One of the things that we did over the summer, which I thought was really, for us, very sort of illustrative of some of the challenges, was we hosted a couple panel discussions with teachers. And one of the things that we found was things moved so quickly in the spring that teachers hadn't really had a chance to process, and school staff hadn't really had a chance to process. Administrators, you went from how do we meet everyone's technology needs and support them now to how do we support them over the summer? How do we make sure they're getting food? And then what do we do about reopening? And there really wasn't that chance to just kind of take a step back and really think and kind of process. And so I think one of the biggest things we're hearing is just the need for people to have a safe and supportive opportunity to do that, to talk about how they're feeling, to talk about their concerns. I think that the concerns and the stressors are very similar across the board. How do I meet the needs of kids in this sometimes virtual environment? I think there's a lot of concerns about how kids were going to respond to coming back to school, wearing masks and very, different environment. But from everything we've heard, certainly in our school district in Queensbury, kids really rose to the challenge. Like, they got that. They understood what they had to do. It's just kind of interesting to see some of the strategies that schools were able to employ to do that. So that was a great relief, but there's still just the kind of everyday sort of drain of this, and then not really knowing when it's going to end. And I feel like we're getting to a point right now where it feels like it's starting to ramp up again, and that's hard. That's hard for schools, and for families and for students. I don't know if I answered your question about the stressors. Like, they just go on and on and on. But
Right.
I think that, part of it is just the need to be heard. That's a
Yep.
really big one. And I know schools are doing a really good job of that, but it's just something that we have to kind of remember, especially as we get into, the coming months.
Thank you. And Amy, you made a good point, because some of you who are listening, and I see Dr. Larry Dake joined us today. Last time he was on our panel, and he had shared that their area had seen a huge spike in Broome County, and it had just started to go down from being a yellow zone and an orange zone. But then they were faced with all kinds of new challenges about how to do testing in school, and that spike. And now, of course, we're going into that. We all have this feeling that we're going into that wave that was kind of predicted. What new challenges come with that? So that's a whole other new heap of, not only where have we been, but where are we going now as fall goes into winter. So thank you for reminding us of that. Heather.
Hi, I'm
Hi,
Heather
Heather.
Adams, and I am, as Karen said, I work for New York State United Teachers, but I have 25 years of experience working in New York State education organizations, starting with School Boards Association. I was there for 12 years, and then I was with Capital Region BOCES for a number of years as their value-added coordinator. So some of you may know me from trainings across the state on value-added. But in the past 10 years, I've worked for NYSET, and some of the things that we focus on, or that I've been focusing on, are the teacher evaluation system, assessment, data privacy, and in this case, mental health education. So Amy and I have done some work together, trying to stay on the same page and understand kind of where people are coming from. The stressors that we've been seeing, the feeling of isolation, they're worried about their students, the loss of that typical in-person relationship building with students and staff and family members, I think is a huge deal. And the fact, like right now they're in this first new school year, the feeling that they're not able to do their best teaching under the circumstances. And that can be truly debilitating when you feel that way day after day after day. And people, as Amy said, don't feel like they got a break over the summer to kind of recharge. And so I see the teachers like not ever filling the cup back up. They dump it all out all day, and then they're not ever able to kind of fill it back up. And that's, I think, we need to figure out ways to kind of help them to do that. And hopefully we can give you some ideas today.
Thank you, Heather. It's nice to see how we connect, professionally. You've worked with Amy before. We're going to switch to your good friend and colleague, Terry, in a minute. And many of the things that you said, we can certainly identify with as school leaders too. That feeling of the empty tank that didn't get refreshed over the summer, the daily drain, and that isolation, and just feeling that even if we're working so hard, but maybe not doing our best after all the hard work that we're putting into it. So thank you for that. Let's go to your colleague, Terry.
Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I am a former math and science teacher, middle and high school, for about 20 years in Marcellus, New York, in the central New York area. And I've been at NYSET, hard to believe, for 13 years already. So I have close to 25 years experience in education as well. At NICET, I work on a lot of policy issues around learning standards and assessments in the areas of math, science, technology education, career and tech ed, and the arts. But I also provide information, technical assistance, and training around community schools, family engagement, restorative practices, and safe schools. In addition to whatever else falls across my desk, as I'm sure you're all used to as well. So about 3 years ago, I attended a 4-day training by the International Institute of Restorative Practices, and I became really interested in it. And I'm actually currently in a certificate program at the University of San Diego on restorative practices to become a certified restorative practices trainer. So it's something that I've been working on. I've also been working on family engagement, especially linked to learning, family home visits, student-led conferences, and things like that. And we've done some of that virtually. So I think one of the biggest stressors that teachers and educators and administrators, I'm sure, feel is anxiety. And it's really that uncertainty and that ability to control what's happening and what's happening, what's going to happen, we're seeing happening now, what's going to happen in the future. And I think that educators, administrators, everybody just wants some resources to cope with those feelings of anxiety too. I bring up my math and science background because last weekend was the APNIS conference, which is the Math Teachers Association conference. And I did a presentation on educational issues. And one of the things I asked them was how they were doing. And all the responses are what you've heard. They're overwhelmed, they're exhausted. But one of the things that was really noticeable about the conference this year was they had a lot of strands and sessions on social emotional learning. And it wasn't just social emotional learning for their students, but it was also social emotional learning or social emotional resources for teachers as well, which I thought was interesting. And so there's definitely a need for that. But I want to piggyback for a minute on what Amy said about teachers not having the opportunity to process what was going on and to take that one step further and saying they didn't have the opportunity to grieve what was happening. A lot of them had colleagues, relatives, new people, friends that were sick or that passed away. They were very concerned about the brick and mortar school, what was going to happen. The loss of the opportunities for their students to participate in graduation, to participate in moving up ceremonies, and all of that, those types of normal school activities that, they didn't just have a chance not to process them, they didn't have a chance to grieve them and talk about their feelings about them and move on.
Thank you, Terry. And Terry, you mentioned resources, and I'm really glad you did because a couple of weeks ago, we had Jolene DeBrango, who is the Executive Vice President of NICET, as one of our guests. And I've had the pleasure to work with Jolene in a lot of different kinds of circumstances. And one thing I've learned from working with Jolene is what a tremendous source of resources on professional learning NICET is. Sometimes we as school leaders think that the resources that would be found there would be primarily and only to help teachers with professional learning and growth. But even going on the NICET website is just tapping into a gold mine of wonderful directions and resources that can help us as school leaders, particularly now. So I would encourage you as school leaders to connect with NICET maybe more than you currently do. Explore the website, see what's there, because there's so much there in terms of resources. Let's go to Laura. Laura, tell us a little bit about the work Peaceful Schools is doing and how it connects with some of the things that people are feeling right now.
Hi, good afternoon. First of all, just thank you to SAANYS for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I really appreciate the chance to meet you all, and thank you to everybody who turned out this afternoon. So, at Peaceful Schools, we our foundation is in training and coaching and programming around social emotional learning, around conflict resolution, peer mediation, restorative practices, teaching kids and grownups the skills that we're talking about. And so I just, I think a lot of the things I'm going to say are just going to echo some of the things that Amy and Heather and Terry have shared. What we're noticing is that adults just need things in chunk size pieces right now, right? That everybody, they can handle about 90 minutes, 60 minutes of any kind of professional development that you might be trying to push out at this point. And that's okay. So we, I know one of the things we've been doing is learning how to just really put things in bite-sized pieces and how to, I just want to reinforce what we found through this whole process is that teachers do have the answers. We just need them to have a little bit of time to unpack those answers and share what they're learning and what they know. And so we have found that high quality structured dialogue that allows people to share what they're figuring out, right? None of us have done this before. And so just owning that and saying, hey, here's an opportunity to have a dialogue, to be a professional learning community for the next few minutes, and let's share what we're finding out. So that's been a really important piece. I think the other thing that we're finding is that, yes, we're in a pandemic, but we also have a social movement that has intensified around race and equity. And we're finding that people need a chance to talk and process about that simultaneously with all the things instructionally that have needed to be adapted. So we've really focused on helping people have dialogue circles, and both virtually, and then how do we do those things safely in person. And we've just found that really, really rewarding. So I look forward to hearing, the deeper we go into this and hearing from you guys today. I hope you'll start to put some things as we go in the chat about what you're learning, because I think that's where the gold nuggets are.
Thanks a lot, Laura. And thanks for leading us with that phrase, high quality structured dialogue, because we can kind of pin that for this conversation, because that's going to be a big focus when we soon switch over to very specific kinds of strategies that we do see working in schools. So thank you for kind of bringing us there. Joe, you've done such good work for a long time around the impact of trauma on students, and now, by extension, other members of the school community. Tell us a little bit about your work right now, and also bring us into your work as a SAANYS mentor and try to connect those dots for us.
Absolutely, Karen. Let me first say that thanks for putting me last in this group, so all the smart things can be said and then they follow up with me. That was a gift. Yeah, let's put 4 smart people in front of him and then let him talk. So a couple of things. Let me give the overarching concept that we're most struggling with right now in the work that I do. And that's finding the balance between doing things with fidelity and having understanding of where people are at. And I know that sounds a little bit vague, so let me give it a more specific tone. We can't completely let go of all the expectations and all the hopes we have for this school year. I am not one that's going to say, well, it's a terrible year, it's a pandemic, let's just flush the year in the beginning of November. But in the same regard, I am also not one to move forward without understanding that we are facing something the likes of which we have no plans for, we have no experience with, and that we're essentially making up as we go along. And so I think I come back to a very simple equation that we've often used when we talk about student behavior in schools. And that's clear expectations plus the necessary supports, then and only then accountability. And that's the world that I live in every day, is we have to be really clear about what we expect out of each of us, whether that be a staff member, an administrator, a parent, a student, a community member. But we have to provide the right level of supports to each of those people to meet those expectations. And so in the work that I do, I try really hard to create systems to do that work. And so let me start by talking about the mentoring system that SAANYS has. So I became aware of SAANYS mentoring a couple years back, really in an offhanded way, when Karen and I were talking one day, either before or after a professional development that I had done. And she was talking about the program. I was like, I'd love to be part of that program. I'd love to help people avoid some of the potholes that I drove my car into again and again. And so I got to know Bonnie Tryon through that process and became a mentor. Additionally, Bonnie also serves as the facilitator and really the teacher of the coaches in my organization too. So we have a contract with SAANYS to provide support directly to family counseling service for the coaching services that we give. So I might be a little biased towards the process. But what mentoring really is providing that person that all new or new to a position administrators can use in times like these. When I sit on those mentoring calls for SAANYS, the thing that really comes crystal clear to me is I cannot believe how much experience and expertise is on this call. And I'm not going to say an awful lot because these people have forgotten more than I know. It's really an incredible collection of people from really all aspects of the work in all areas of the state. And so the mentoring, whether it be, there's two versions, there's a one-to-one mentoring program, and then there's a small group mentoring program. And SAANYS can support both of those, and Bonnie does a better job of describing them than I do. What ultimately comes down to that same idea is that most administrators who are coming into these positions have high expectations of themselves, want to meet those expectations, and they need that additional support to meet them. And the mentoring program can provide that support. In terms of family counseling, we're a multifaceted organization. We've been around for 60 years. Most of our history is based in direct service to clients, generally through therapy and counseling. But over the last 10 years, we've been really focused on what can we do proactively. And so we have launched a number of initiatives in that regard. The two that I'll highlight right now, one is Finger Lakes Community Schools. Finger Lakes Community Schools provides technical assistance and professional development for school staffs in the Finger Lakes region around best practices. I think community schools is at least part of the answer to what we're facing in our schools today. And I know Laura also has great experience in this. So I'm going to show you the community schools model for Wayne County, New York. And it's a way of organizing, it's a framework that allows us to take all the resources we have. And if you can see, I know it's blown up a little bit, maybe I can make it a little smaller. But if you can see that students are at the center of this model, and then we wrap around the student with services and supports. So parents and family, community, collaborating together as one. And as far as Wayne County community schools go, we really look at these 5 areas in ways to support the student, utilizing best practices through a trauma-informed lens. And so that leads me to the second piece of this puzzle, which is the Finger Lakes Resiliency Network. The purpose of the Resiliency Network is to help organizations along the trauma-informed continuum. From step 1 being trauma-informed or aware, to step 2 being trauma sensitive, meaning we not only know about trauma, but we're not triggering or re-traumatizing others, to the most important step, which is step 3, which is not only avoiding trauma, but being part of the healing process or healing centered. And so as far as that goes, we try to support that work by using what is called the collaboration arch, which is attachment, regulation, or more specifically, self-regulation, competency, and health. And so that's another lens for us to guide our work through supporting young people, or to be honest, adults, with what do they need in these areas to feel competent, to feel strong. So whether it be the Resiliency Network work we do or the community schools work, we're always focused on what makes someone successful, and we believe it's those 4 categories: attachment, regulation, competency, and health. Hopefully I answered the question.
Thank you. Joe, you're based in the Finger Lakes. What if, our listeners are from all regions of the state? What if a listener right now is kind of thinking, that sounds really good. Is there a similar resource or connection I can make in my region? I'm just kind of throwing this out. If they were to contact you, perhaps, would you be able to lead them to good connections in their own regions that are doing similar work? Because they may not be aware of them in their own area of the state.
Yes. 2 quick things on that, Karen. One is there is a statewide group that is meeting around healing-centered environments.
Yeah.
It's actually currently sponsored by DCJS, the Department of Criminal Justice for New York State.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say is that community schools, there's 2 national community schools organizations.
Yep.
One is in Children's Aid in New York City, and the other is in Los Angeles. Both great resources. But yes, I would welcome anyone who would like to contact me directly, and I can point you in the right direction. And sometimes we do work out of region. So for example, I have 16 organizations in my current cohort for the Resiliency Network, and 3 of those are in Cortland County.
Thank you. And,
Karen, can I just add a resource?
Yes, please. Yeah. Please do.
There's also 3 technical community school technical assistance centers, and there's one through the University of Binghamton. They have the Western New York Technical Assistance Center. Rockland 21C has the Eastern New York one, and Fordham University has the New York City, Long Island Technical Assistance Center. And I can send that to you too, the link
That
for
would be
those.
great.
Yeah.
That would be great. And Joe brought up community schools, and it's interesting that when we did our planning conversation, I think particularly, Terry, the conversation you and I had really was focused on community schools. And I think one thing I realized is that such a big topic that has so much importance and relevance right now that I think I can kind of guarantee everyone that we'll be doing another discussion or a SAANYS spotlight just focused on community schools, because I think the time has come for all of us to have a better understanding of what community schools are and how they can work in our region. So let's just really say to be continued on the topic of community schools. Absolutely. And Joe, thanks so much for sharing how mentoring connects with this idea of support. I have to ask, I see Dr. Bonnie Tryon here. She's our mentoring guru and coordinator. Bonnie, just give us a few more of your thoughts in terms of how we can connect with the good things that SAANYS mentoring options offer right now. You're muted. Sorry, Bonnie's muted. She'll come back. Okay.
Karen, can I,
Yes.
before we leave the topic of community schools, just connect that back to staff wellness for a moment?
Yes, please do.
One of the things that I know this from just personally from teachers that I know and administrators that I know this as a board member, and certainly from meeting with people all across the state, that educators feel very passionate about the work that they do and their commitment to the whole child, not just learning. And one of the things that community schools provides is support for the whole child. And so I think sometimes the challenge for educators is, they have their own responsibilities with the learning piece, but they see and they're aware of all these other things that are happening, whether it has to do with transportation for families or food for families or clothes or safety or housing or whatever it might be. And especially with our older students too, they're hearing some of their experiences in their communities and some of the challenges that they're feeling, especially now around social injustice conversations, things like that. So the community schools provides sort of this safety net, this wraparound safety net that I think when that's in place can be really validating, I guess, and supportive for staff. And even in its absence of a formal community school model, the idea of helping build those school community partnerships can go a really long way in sort of helping teachers feel like they have the support of the community around them and that they don't have to do it all themselves, and that all they need to do is know who the person is and be able to make that connection. And it helps to build, I think, those family engagement, those relationships as well, because they have that strong bond, with the community and know who those resources and referrals are. So there's something about community schools, I think, that can really support staff wellness. And even in its absence of a formal community schools model, building those strong connections and collaborations helps teachers know that they're not alone in this. And that speaks to their wellness.
And that's a great connection to make, because earlier in our conversation today, somebody brought up one real stressor for teachers, and certainly for you as school leaders too. You see your students hurting. I mean, you see students and families hurting in all different kinds of ways, and not being able to feel you are doing enough to support them in that way, in addition to the academic kinds of expectations, is a big stressor. So we can't compartmentalize these topics very much, because they all kind of come together into that kind of circle of support that helps and lifts everyone. So we're really getting kind of a nice prism of ideas here around this idea of support.
Karen, can I jump? Laura, could I jump in here? Because I feel like this is a good spot for some of the things I wanted to share today.
Yep, please go ahead.
I'm going to share my screen really quickly if my computer will let me. But, part of the conversation for today was really about, oh, sorry, you guys.
All right.
There we go. As we're thinking about trying to support teachers and, this whole conversation around community schools, when we think about community schools, really everyone needs resources, right? And when we can help the school become a hub of how do we connect, I think New York State is actually resource rich, but a lot of times things are siloed and we don't always know how to connect with them. And with, all of the stressors of COVID-19, I think we have a lot of people who haven't needed to tap into community resources before, and they might not know how to find them. And that might include your teachers. Not everybody knows how to ask for help. And a lot of people who maybe haven't, they've always been the helper and they haven't ever had to be the recipient. They need a reminder that it's okay, that resilience is knowing how to ask for assistance. And so as you think about how you're supporting your teachers, sometimes we can be a little sneaky, if you will. The topics that you see here, these common needs, food and nutrition, housing and utilities, access to health and well-being, both physical, mental, emotional, sometimes financial or legal services. You can share resources with your teachers under the guise of, hey, this way in case you're on a call with a parent or you have a student ask. But you might be amazed at how many of your teachers also need these resources. So things are so unique by region and county, but a couple of just easy compass pointers. You can go to newyork.gov services, and they have a really beautiful and easy to go through webpage that's driven by topics around some of those needs I just listed. And then you can find out, you can drill down to what's available in your county. And then the other thing that I think it's overlooked is the 211 Connect or 211.org. And again, regionally, this is often hosted by different organizations that provide the support, but you can put your information in and find someone who spends their day connecting community people with resources. And the other part is to remind you guys that you can play a little bit of a role, even if you're not a community school yet, right? Can you put some things in public spaces, make it easy for people who maybe don't know how to ask to see a pamphlet or see a flyer? You could put one website at a time in your school newsletter. Make sure everybody in your building knows who in the building is that go-to person. It's not, sometimes it's the social worker, it's not always, but maybe it's your school nurse. Who knows all the people to call and how to reach out in your community, get connected with those things. And then if there are ways to create opportunities to destigmatize asking for help and give people a chance to kind of share, whether, that's on a social media post or, just making a couple of minutes in a faculty meeting to say, hey, is there a resource anybody has used in our community? But just opening up the opportunity to talk about resources. And then I, have shared, actually, Amy's on here, but Mahaney's is a great resource for mental health. As we're talking with teachers, everybody has mental health at top of mind for their students, for their colleagues, and, for the families that they interface with. And then, I added a couple of other, really easy to search resources. So I'll stop my screen share here, but when we think about that community school model, we're talking about wrapping around those different needs that Joe laid out so well for us.
Thank you so much, Laura. And we're firmly now in our sharing strategies part of our conversation. So we're going to keep that going to hopefully leave you with as many as we can by the end of our hour. And I think Bonnie is available to us now. So Bonnie, if I could ask you to go back and connect some dots with mentoring and how this fits.
Sure, thanks, Karen. And thank you to Joe too, who does a brilliant job in representing our mentor coaches. And there are several other of our SAANYS mentor coaches, on the SAANYS Connect as well. I see Chick and Jay and others. So a shout out. There are about 15 or so, and Karen as well, I should say, another mentor coaches, about 15. Can you imagine having 15 Joes and Karens and others to listen to you, to hear what you're thinking and what your heart is saying? So we do offer support for new school leaders and for those changing positions either in district or in moving to different districts. Some of that is required by state education department for certification purposes, but more often than not, it's about leadership development for school leaders. And in this time of uncertainty, how can we best help all of you as school leaders de-stress so you can best help your teachers and staff de-stress, because you can't give what you don't first have. So if you're stressed as a leader, that's going to spill over to the people around you. And our mentor coaches, either in a one-to-one model or in a small group, as Joe talked about, can provide that safe, confidential space so school leaders can work out their just-in-time problems of practice, much of which is around de-stressing. So if you're interested in any of that, let us know. Contact me or Karen through the SAANYS website. She'll give you our contact information. But so with that, a couple of tips. What can we do? First, listen. Really, really listen. Our mentor coaches often use the acronym for WAIT, W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? Sometimes we need to do this. just need to stop and put our ears on and hear the heart of our staff around us. When we hear that, it's an opening. And sometimes we have to have that opening come out so the emotions can come out and we can actually hear what's behind that. The other thing that does is it allows us to create those micro moments of connection. And when we can connect with the human being in front of us, in whatever role that is, there's more receptivity and positivity to reducing whatever that level of stress can be. And so as 2 tips, again, 1, connect with whoever is doing the mentoring in your organization. Who are your teacher mentors? Go listen to them. What are they saying about the teachers they are working with? And none of us have enough time because somehow, even when we're working remotely, the to-do lists keep growing. And the same thing is true for our staffs. So you're a leader. That's why you're on a SAANYS Connect call. What do you do to manage your time? Some of the best things that you'd use as time management tips are things that you can help the staff that you work with. Just small, quick things. And in considering use of time, don't just have a meeting to have a Zoom meeting. Make that, if you are required to contractually, okay, do it, but build in opportunities for that connection from human to human so that you can create those micro moments of connection. And lots of what I just talked about, what Joe talked about with others who've been on here, you're all saying the same thing. How do we be human with one another so we can help hold one another collectively accountable? So contact Karen or me or Joe or Chick or any of the other SAANYS mentor coaches. We'll be glad to let you know about this supports. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks for bringing in the listening piece. And we're going to go right now, if we can, to Heather and to Terry to share a strategy around a circle process that I think has a lot to do with listening and also connects with the circle option that we have for mentoring. But let's hear about how it works in Terry and Heather and the work that they do at NYSIP. Terry, you want to get us started on that?
Sure. So, I really like that segue because Bonnie just talked about connections and listening. And a circle is a great opportunity in process to do that. It's very accessible. It's low cost. And it can really help educators build the community and really build relationships and really heal. So I think it's a great opportunity for schools to use with their staff. When I do a lot of training around restorative practices, I always tell them to do circles as a staff first, to get used to building the relationships, to model what it looks like, and to really build their social emotional skills in dealing with problems that come up, use it for problem solving. It's so many ways that a circle could be used today. And, I try and tell people it's not about counseling, it's about problem solving. What's going on? Look at the standards that are being implemented right now across the state. We're in different phases for math, ELA, science, the arts, physical education. Use it for some of those instructional and content pieces. Use it to build the community. Use it to discuss hybrid and remote learning practices. And if I could put a plug in here, our Education Learning and Trust has a webinar series on hybrid and remote learning. I'll send the link to you, Karen, about that too. The first 2 parts were filled to capacity. Teachers were looking for that, for some resources around that. But use it to talk about concerns for their own personal and student safety. Use it before they introduce the circle idea to their students. It gives teachers a voice. It helps them even think about the shape. Being a math person, geometry matters. Everybody has an equal voice. Everybody has an equal opportunity to speak and to be heard and to listen to. So I think there's really a lot of uses it could be used for. I've heard of some school districts having like a Wellness Wednesday. They have a circle and they just talk about, give people a chance to vent and problem solve about what those problems are. And someone said earlier that teachers have the answers and educators have the answers, administrators have the answers, but they don't always get a chance to share them or for people to ask what some of those possible answers could be. So I think the circle process, we call them healing circles. They're also called talking circles or dialogue circles, but it's a really great opportunity for, and as I said, low cost, doesn't cost anything, for teachers to have a voice and to connect with each other. And we do have training on that through our Education Learning Trust, and I shared those resources with Michelle as well.
Thank you. So, so Terry brings up ELT, Educational Learning Trust. When I was referring to the gold mine of resources at NYSET, that's pretty much where I wanted to get. And that would help us. Terry, I just want to nail this down because this idea of how many ways a simple circle format in our schools and buildings and districts can be helpful right now. It's not a big, heavy resource, weighty thing that demands a lot of time and planning and paperwork or anything like that. So just kind of tell us if some of our leaders are listening right now and saying, you know, I think that circle format could be a really good thing, both to talk about some of the academic questions that we have, as well as how people are feeling about what they're experiencing right now. Just give us a where to start lead in terms of how do we begin learning about perhaps how to bring a simple for our staff circle format to our buildings.
Right. I highly recommend this book. I will send you the link. It's called Circle Forward by Carol's Boyce Watson and Kay Pranis. And there's lots of circle ideas in there, not just for students, but with staff as well. And she really lays out the circle process very easily, starting with a circle keeper, you know, someone who just facilitates it, an opening round just to get a sense of how everyone's feeling, some rounds, which are, you know, a question you may want to pose, or a series of questions to pose, and, you know, kind of a reflection. What can be done in a positive manner about the questions or the discussion that happened that day, and kind of a closing. You can always add a mindfulness piece to it, you know, just a deep breathing, just so everybody's centered. But there's a lot of, you know, it's a very structured process, but, you know, it could be done very easily with a group of teachers.
Thank you. And also many options on the name. Let's go to Heather.
Yeah, just jump in just for just a second. One of the things I think that's very important is you're not doing this to teachers. You are participating in the learning circle with teachers. And in doing that, you're building that community and that trust, because in order to be in that circle and share those things that you're experiencing and that you're, you know, like feeling anxiety about, you need to have that safe space. And by doing that, you're building those relationships with those teachers in a way that you may not have done in the past, because now you're part of this kind of sacred group of people that are sharing. It's one of those things we talked at the very beginning. Karen mentioned, you know, this is something that you can move forward, you know, post-COVID and have really great conversations and troubleshooting with your staff in a way, because you built these great relationships.
Thank you. Heather, what would a typical circle look like? Let's say we're seeing them done virtually right now. If a building leader was interested in bringing a circle format, and once again, it's a matter of whether we call it a healing circle, which may be too touchy-feely for someone's taste, a talking circle, a culture circle, whatever we call. What might it look like right now? How many people might be in it?
And you could have as many as you want. It's probably the more manageable, the better. So like something like, you know, 5 or 10 or 7 people, especially when we're talking about remote, because Terry and I have done a couple of remote trainings, and you end up taking up a lot more time than you expect because people are really open to sharing, especially when they're talking about the things that we've been talking about today, you know, like the things they're stressed out about. And if you're going to ask one or two questions and every person is going to respond, and granted, we're more in a Brady Bunch kind of thing than a circle, you know, electronically, but, you know, to take this and have them move through each person to have the opportunity, which they do not have to speak, but have the opportunity to speak. You want to keep it as manageable as possible. That doesn't mean you once things are kind of back to normal, you couldn't, you know, have it in a regular staff meeting or you know, in a PLC or in, you know, there's so many different ways that you could do this, you know, subject area specific or grade level specific, and you know, figuring out ways to kind of create these smaller groups that people can then create, you know, kind of create that that in-person but not in-person situation that we haven't been able to have this year.
And
Absolutely. Let's go to Joe and then to Amy.
Yeah, just real quick, Zoom in their most recent rollout, which I think was a day or two ago, allows you to create a seating chart for a Zoom call, which means that everybody will see the faces on the screen in the same order, which is great for circles because at least you know, you don't have to say, well, the person's name, or everybody is on the same order on everybody's screen, but you have to update to the most recent version of Zoom. The only other thing I'll mention in regards to that is we worked on a restorative practices toolkit for Finger Lakes Community Schools, and that is on our website. It's free of charge. I worked on it with a couple of colleagues. flxcommunityschools.org is a pretty good collection of starting activities, who can do them, what does it look like. That's another resource for people if they'd like.
Thank you so much. Amy, share a little bit about the school district that you referenced in the chat.
Oh yeah, Wheatland Chili School District right outside of Rochester had conducted some circles with their staff, in-person circles with their staff prior to school, the reopening of school this year. And we look forward to partnering with them in the next couple of weeks to do a little video to put on our website just to share kind of their experiences, sort of the logistics of it, but what were some of the challenges and what did they get from it? What were some of the feedback that they received? So we really look forward to being able to do that with them.
Thank you. And let me ask you, Amy, because I can tell if I was still an active principal at a school, my wheels would be turning right now, and I would be thinking about how to set up perhaps a circle format, but being very cautious about not bringing a big new initiative type thing right now. So would there be a way to kind of ease in perhaps with members of your faculty who might be interested in joining a circle format and having some conversations around topics of interest in the school without feeling like you as the leader have to bring this heavy sounding new initiative to people that they think will be one more thing, quote unquote. So is there a way to maybe ease in a lower key way to explore a circle format? Any of our panelists, feel free to kind of share, because I think, you know, folks might be thinking about how this can benefit.
I feel like it's not my area of expertise, so I'm going to defer, but I do want to just say that I think one of the things we're hearing, kind of a resounding theme, is that when we find something that works well for our students and it supports them, it's going to work well and support our staff as well. So if you're doing, like, Responsive Classroom has morning meetings, then you have, you know, more formal restorative practices. If you're doing those kinds of things in your school and that's helpful for your students, I would think it's going to be helpful for your staff as well. That's where I would leave it and let the experts respond.
Laura?
I know.
I'm sorry, Terry.
I was just going to say, I think, Laura, I think Peaceful Schools actually has some resources for virtual restorative practices. Am I right about that?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. And actually, Jamie Cook is on the line with me. So, you know, last spring, we pivoted pretty quickly to be able to figure out how to run an effective circle virtually. And so if you're already doing circles and you'd like to learn some of the practices that we have found, please feel free to reach out. And if you'd just like to get your staff dialoguing, we also have supported facilitation, you know, so if you're not ready to actually say that you're adopting restorative practices as a strategy, but you'd like to actually offer that as some support, there's a couple different ways that we could go. And yeah, you can feel free to go to our website, or you can reach out to us at info@peacefulschools.com. You know, what's great about this work right now is, you know, whether it's the trauma informed or the restorative work, you know, I'm so grateful that all of this was the seeds, and the start of this has been happening over the last, you know, 20 years, but more intensely over the last 5 to 7, because I think it's given all of us a depth of understanding to be more functional in this moment. So there, in almost every county, there are people, you know, doing this work. We're always glad to help, but please make sure you reach out to your local resources too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just
Early
going to
on,
I was just going to say we
Karen?
have the healing circle training through the ELT as well, where we do that virtually for schools. It's a healing talking circle that's available through our Education Learning Trust.
Through the NICET website.
Right.
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks.
Early on today, Heather, you mentioned, you know, bringing things down to bite-sized chunks right now, right? So some of our leaders might be thinking about a circle format that would give their teachers the opportunity to talk about one question. You know, what challenges are you encountering in the hybrid format this week? You know, some question like that. What challenges are you coming up against? Let's talk about what they are. Maybe share some, you know, problem solving. So it can be as simple as that. It does not have to be around bigger issues or building wide initiatives, but just, you know, how are things going with your remote models? What do you want to talk about? You know, what do we need
Right.
to
And one of the things that, if you're going to start with something like that, is I would want a second question, which is what's working well.
Right, exactly.
So people are sharing out those practices that are working for them. We need to kind of remember to focus on things we do have control over, and things that we can be helpful. You don't want to start a bitch session. You don't want to ask a question that's only going to end up in a bitch session.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of craft your questions carefully, but oftentimes it's, you know, okay, what was the one thing you did this week that worked really well that you would like to share?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be as simple as that, yes.
And I think the resource that Terry shared would be helpful in giving people some of those guidelines for how to start one successfully. Anybody else, members of our panel or folks who are listening right now that want to share either maybe an experience they've had with the circle format or any of the other tools or strategies that we've spoken about today?
Karen, can I just mention that by doing these and getting comfortable with them,
Yeah.
you can start doing them with your students, and then that kind of helps to address the mental health education piece that is required by every school district.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's a help in right now in helping your staff, but it also is something that you can start building to help your students and to also meet the criteria that's necessary for the mental health education piece.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Karen, I would just,
yes.
A word of caution when doing circles is I think slow and low is the key for running circles. Like cooking a roast, right?
I've burnt a few, so
I would very strongly recommend at least having a couple people in the district who are somewhat trained in the process,
mm-hmm.
have some expertise in the work, and there's enough organizations out there to support that work. I would also say that it has to start, Laura already made this point partially, and I want to echo that point she made. I would say it starts with the administrative team in each district. And so I'll give you a 20-second example. District is interested in doing circles. I go in with them and someone who is an expert at doing the work, actually a national expert at doing the work. We get in with the administrative team for the first time, and it is a complete mess. People are crying. There's anger in the room. The superintendent calls it this kumbaya crap. It was a mess to every end of the earth. If you can't get that straight in your administrative team, it shouldn't be put on your staff. And if you can't get it right with your adults, it shouldn't be put on your kids. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of work through the process. In my estimation, even in a really stable school district, that's at least a couple of year process to get good at, and it's got to be really slow process because it's about the relationships, not about the topics.
Mhm. So today we're kind of moving toward good resources that people might want to start with and bring to their administrative teams to share to start to build some understanding of a format that might be helpful in a lot of different capacities in districts. Anyone else would you like to share before we sign off here? Bonnie.
It's a blessing to know that we have such brilliant people in our state doing the work that all of you are doing. And collectively, I am encouraged. Carry on.
Thank you. Any parting thoughts from our panelists before we sign off? Well, I just want to thank you all for being here today. I'd like you to, once again, think about attending our virtual SAANYS Sunday on November 22nd. It's one day of the 4-day NICEGate conference. It's really going to be a terrific day in a very relaxed kind of format that you can enjoy at home in, you know, different kinds of ways. So we hope you check it out. And meanwhile, I really want to thank Amy and Heather, Terry, Laura, and Joe for being here today, Bonnie being here today. And also, I see Chick. I don't see him right now on my screen, but I saw Chick Quattrini, who's another one of our seasoned SAANYS mentors and one of the best listeners I know. I would highly recommend, you know, the kinds of listening skills that Chick kind of models for all of us in his mentoring. We have such a great group of people to bring to your people. So if you'd like to know any more about that, just please let me know. And once again, just keep connecting. That's what it's all about right now. You know, we certainly connected a lot of dots today in how we support teachers and ourselves and students at the same time. And that's really what we're all going for right now. So I hope you found our conversation enjoyable and helpful. And I hope you'll join us for future conversations. And with that, we'll say good evening, have a wonderful night, and keep connecting. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Karen. Thanks for a
Bye-bye.
great,
Thank
great
you.
hour. Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.